Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Nyk Reed. I'm faculty here in the Science, Engineering, and Math department. I teach primarily life science, genetics, and developmental biology, anatomy, and physiology. For those of you that are not aware, my PhD is in genetics. My dissertation focused on conservation relative to evolution. One of the things that has always kind of fascinated me with biology is kind of, in my mind, how it kind of mirrors our faith. And those of you all that know me, especially if you have me in class, you know that I'm really fascinated with the kind of weird things. And what I mean by that is duck-billed platypus. A platypus has the bill of a duck. It has venomous spurs, and it lays eggs. That's something that kind of contradicts everything we think a mammal should be. The same with the ice fish. The ice fish has clear blood. It's the only organism with clear blood because it doesn't need red blood cells due to where it lives on very oxygen-dense aquatic shelves, in ridges, in frigid water. And those seem like very complex organisms, but just like humans, they all start off simply as a single cell. We start off as single cell organisms, very simple, and due to cell divisions, migrations, foldings, we become very complex. And that's kind of how I view our faith, at least my faith. It started out very simply, but as I've gotten older, it's got more complex. So a little bit about me and my faith and my journey. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, as some of you all may know. I grew up in the church, Methodist family, grew up at Bethany United Methodist Church in New Orleans. My earliest memories of church are Sunday school, going to 8 o'clock service with my mom and dad. When I was young, you know, my faith was very simplistic. It was God is love. Jesus loves all the little children. There wasn't that much nuance, like a single cell organism, like we are at our earliest. Then as I got older, I learned biblical stories of all variety, fire and brimstone, Sodom and Gomorrah, people being turned into pillars of salt, miracles and healing. These may seem like simple stories. They have very complex themes. They cover vengeance, wrath, disobedience, but also love and healing. My faith became more nuanced. My faith slightly changed, becoming God is all power with immeasurable capacity and might, but still filled with love and compassion. As I got into high school, I was able to fully see the mission of the church, and to fully see the mission of the church is to help the helpless, be compassionate, just, and fair. My field looks at complex things and attempts to break them down into their simplest components, which are actually pretty complex. My faith is something that began simply, but becomes complex as we grow and mature. By the time I got to high school, I really knew I wanted to do something relative to biology. A little bit of background on my parents. My dad is a retired fireman now. He very much encouraged me and my sisters to understand how things worked. We grew up working on cars, doing repairs around the house. So kind of the idea of tinkering, figuring out how things worked and the nuances really played into me wanting to understand how cells work, how things divide in different functions, different capacities. My mom has a master's degree in microbiology, she has a nursing degree, and she has a master's degree in nursing education. My mom's story is actually one that kind of prepared me for grad school. My mom was, her undergrad degree from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, is in microbiology. She's working towards a PhD in microbiology, where if anybody's from Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, you know, we're prone to hurricanes. So 2 years into her PhD work, a hurricane hit New Orleans and the incubators and freezers went out for 2 weeks. So all the cells that she'd been working on, bacteria she'd been culturing, died. So she took her master's degree and decided to go to nursing school. And because one of the things my mom wanted to do is to help people. And she's one of the most compassionate people and empathetic people that I know. And she always sparked that kind of love for science in me and my sister. So we grew up with a microscope in the house, magnifying glasses. So she always kind of fostered that. So in high school, I talked to her about what we were doing in my biology classes. I talked to my dad, and it was always, well, how's this work? How's this happen? So then when I went away to school, I went to Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, where I majored in biology with a minor in chemistry. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. I loved my time in Tallahassee. I had decided, for better or for worse, that I wanted to be an MD, that I wanted to go to med school. My mom, with her experience working in hospitals, with her experience as a nursing educator, she kept saying to me, I think you might want to consider teaching or research. You might not be happy working in a hospital. So she got me a job between my sophomore and junior year, working at a hospital back home in New Orleans. I was a third shift radiology tech. That was, I believe, in the summer of 2000. So that was before all x-rays were digital like they are now. So an x-ray would be taken, they would then print the x-ray, they'd give it to one of the techs like myself, and we'd have to go to wherever in the hospital the x-ray was supposed to go. And after a while, working there for about a month, I worked there 3 months during the summer, but after about the first month, some of the doctors would talk to me, ask me what my interests were, and they said, hey, why don't you shadow us? And I shadowed some doctors, and it made me realize pretty quickly, I did not want to be an MD. It's a great profession, but it was not the thing that I wanted to do. And I am thankful for those doctors gave me the opportunity to shadow them, because sometimes you know what you want to do by shadowing people, but also you learn what you don't want to do by shadowing people also. So I was kind of at a crossroads. It's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I like biology, I like science, but I don't want to be an MD. And up until then, that's what I wanted to do. And I know for many students, you fall into the same boat of, you spent most of your formative years saying, I want to do this, I want to do this. Then you meet people that do that, or you shadow people that do that, and you're like, I don't want to do this. So luckily, when I went back to school, it was the fall of my junior year, and genetics is a required course for biology majors at Florida A&M, just like it is here. And I'll never forget it. Dr. William Washington taught genetics, and I fell in love with it. It was essentially a course of puzzles. What I mean by that is that we all have heard the central dogma, DNA to RNA to protein, and how your DNA you get from your parents. And if there's any type of mutation or defect in your DNA, it can affect your RNA, affect your protein, it can affect you, it can manifest as diseases, or in some cases, the reason why you have different eye colors are just mutations that have developed over the eons of human existence, to where the oldest eye color is brown, then you have green, then you have blue. Same with brown hair, black hair, red hair, all just slight kind of permutations and abnormalities in the DNA. And that fascinated me because I am a puzzle person. I do the New York Times crossword puzzle every day. I like logic problems, I like Sudokus. So taking genetics really kind of opened my eyes of, man, this is a field where you can get to solve puzzles, figure out how things work, and just like medicine, help people understand new discoveries. So at that point, I fell in love with it. I worked with Dr. Washington doing some Drosophila experiments. For those of you who aren't familiar, Drosophila is kind of the seminal or most historically significant organism in the field of kind of classical genetics, because fruit flies, which is Drosophila melanogaster, they produce a lot of young. They have very abnormal presentations or phenotypes, such as curly wings, wide eyes, extra legs. And it's a great model to learn kind of the basics of genetics. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to go to grad school for genetics, okay? And I applied to several of genetics programs, and the one I really wanted to go to was Vanderbilt. It's a very strong human genetics program, very well regarded. And I got waitlisted, which, that was a punch in the gut. I got waitlisted for that. And, and their reason was that I did not have enough research experiences that they were looking for. My test scores are fine, grades are fine, but I was told I didn't have as much research experience. So to maybe get more research experience and reapply. Which, like I said, that was, a punch in the gut. Because something that I really wanted to do, a university I really wanted to go to, it didn't work out. And like I said, I had some research experience with Dr. Washington. I didn't really have any outside of my university. And partly because I had decided, my junior year that genetics is what I wanted to do, I kind of limited myself compared to some students that had been doing research, doing their freshman year and sophomore year. So that's just kind of the hand I was dealt. And I got a phone call, an unexpected phone call from Meharry Medical College, which, if you're familiar with Meharry, is a smaller university here in Nashville. And I got a call from Dr. Shirley Russell, who was the chair of their microbiology and genetics department, and she told me that how Vanderbilt and Meharry actually have a joint genetics program. So she encouraged me to apply, and that I could still do research and do research in a Vanderbilt lab or Meharry lab, but all the coursework was the same. All the seminars were the same. All the experience would be the same. So I decided to do that. So instead of sitting out a year and doing a year of research, hoping to get into Vandy, I applied and was accepted into Meharry. I did their joint genetics program, which is one of the reasons why there is a special place in my heart for our nursing students. Many of you all may know our nursing students take their courses at Belmont, their nursing courses. So I understand how that is because I was a Meharry student technically, but taking all my coursework at Vanderbilt, doing a research project in a Vanderbilt lab. So aside from the fact that my mom's a nurse, kind of being a student in two universities is why there's a special place in my heart for our nursing students. I understand how tough that can be, juggling the two institutions and the commitments from both. So I ended up doing my PhD, looking at evolutionary similarities in DNA and potential function between fish, human, and mice in the lab of Dr. Douglas Mortlock. Doug was great. He always kind of gave us free rein to really pursue things that really interested us. And one of the things I realized in grad school was that we would have younger students rotating in our lab, sometimes summer students. And the way it usually works in a lab is that an older student will train them, show them how to do certain techniques, teach them about what you're doing in a lab. And I really enjoyed that. And one day, Dr. Michelle Southard-Smith, whose lab is next door to ours, she is a geneticist that looks at kind of intestinal disorders. She was teaching a course called Genetics and Model Systems. And she said, "Nick, I think you do a really good job at teaching. Would you teach a week in my course?" And I taught a week in her course, and it was fantastic. I loved it. And it kind of was my eureka moment of, I like science. I like talking about science. If I teach, I get to talk about science. So that I decided that maybe teaching is what I wanted to do. So I finished my PhD in Doug's lab, and I ended up doing a research fellowship in immunology and rheumatology at Vanderbilt in Dr. Tom Awney's lab, looking at the genetics of the mouse immune system in a novel mutant mouse. And while I was there, a buddy of mine, Dr. David Vaught, who I'm forever grateful, told me, "Hey, Trevecca is looking for someone to teach one class as an adjunct it would be life science. It was essentially their science course for non-majors. I was a little hesitant at first. And the reason was, my PhD has evolution in the title, and I know some people have issues with that. So I came over, I interviewed for the job, I met with Dr. Elisa Russell and Dr. Chris Farrell. And Dr. Farrell and Dr. Russell were fantastic. Dr. Farrell even said, I read your paper on genetics and evolution. It's fantastic. That's what we need around here. So I was like, all right. So I taught my first adjunct course here. I taught it at 8 a.m. In the morning, Tuesday, Thursday, and then I went over to my lab at Vandy. And being in that classroom, talking to those students, I loved it. One of the things that was great about that is that at times in my life, I have kind of struggled with my faith, especially relating my views in science to my faith. And that semester as an adjunct led me to be more upfront with my views of how science and my faith, and it reassured me in that they can coexist and complement each other 100%. I had great conversations with students about their faith and science and how they view that they can coexist. And I admit there were some interesting conversations of how literal interpretation of text may cause some issues for some, and how evolution may cause some issues for some. And I love the fact that we could have those honest conversations. And for me, those things do not conflict at all. And I tell them how I think our faith resembles a cell, and how when we're younger, it's very simple. And like we're one cell at our earliest at fertilization. As we get older, we divide, become more complex, just like our faith. And and it's okay. We're gonna have questions, and that I feel that that's fine. But I do think that your faith and science can 100% coexist, and that there is not an issue with those. And teaching at Trevecca and having those conversations with students, I think, is a powerful experience for everybody involved. And the elephant in the room sometimes is, the idea of what we can and can't teach at Trevecca. People outside the institution ask me that, and I tell them, like, we teach science, and that's not an issue. And we have those conversations about science and faith. So it's kind of like one of the things that my paradigm kind of shifted to where I went to go to Meharry, which I'm forever grateful for that opportunity. Went to Vanderbilt for a postdoc, got through kind of luck and happenstance. I was friends with David Vaught, got to adjunct here, fell in love with this place, and got the opportunity to teach here. And this is year 8 for me. So, I love it here. I consider Trevecca to be home. Most of you all have seen me out playing intramural softball and dodgeball and, trying not to get dunked on playing intramural basketball. So I'm grateful for this place, and this is a special place that we are. So I hope that kind of explained a bit of my journey in a not too rambling way. So thank you.